Dawn creeps over the plains of Castile, pale and cold, the kind of light that seems hesitant to touch the earth. The land is dry, cracked and stubborn, stretching out in muted browns and greys. A low wind drags dust across the hard soil, whispering against the wooden walls of a small village called Vivar. Smoke lifts from cooking fires, thin and blue, carrying the scent of ash and boiled grain. In this quiet, in this sparse corner of the world, a boy steps out into the morning, Rodrigo Díaz. Barefoot, wrapped in a rough wool cloak, he stares at the horizon as if it offers a promise only he can see. Life here is hard. Most children know work before they know play. But Rodrigo stands with a particular stillness, the kind that hints at an inner flint waiting to spark. His family is noble, but only just. They have land, but not much. Castile is a kingdom caught between ambition and vulnerability. To the north lie Christian lands, to the south rise the rich, sophisticated Muslim taifas, powerful city-states that trade, scheme, and wage war in equal measure. It is a world of uneasy coexistence, markets full of shared goods, borders patrolled with suspicion, alliances built and broken overnight. Rodrigo grows up absorbing all of it. He hears Christian hymns drifting from stone churches, and in the distance the call to prayer carried on the wind from Muslim strongholds. He watches merchants speak a patchwork of tongues. He listens to soldiers boasting of raids, skirmishes, and narrow escapes on the frontier. These stories feed him more than bread ever could. In the evenings, he trains with a wooden sword, copying the stance of his father's retainers. He learns how to plant his feet, how to shift his weight, how to move with purpose instead of panic. There is nothing glamorous about it. No shining armour, no gallant tales, only repetition, sweat, and the bruises that bloom across his arms. But he keeps going. People in Vivar begin to notice. The boy does not flinch. He does not step back. When he swings with intention, as though he already imagines himself in real combat. He is not yet strong, but he is determined. And in this land, where kingdoms rise and fall by the will of warriors, determination is a far sharper weapon than strength. Castile itself is restless. Kings shift on thrones, nobles vie for borders, and ambition burns hotter than the summer sun. The frontier creeps forward and slips back again, a living border shaped by battle. And in this tense, unpredictable landscape, Rodrigo's early years shape him into something rare. A child who grows up understanding the brutality of war and the necessity of courage in equal measure. By the time he reaches adolescence, the villagers speak of him with quiet expectation, not as a hero, but as someone destined for the saddle, for the sword, for the harsh, uncertain world that stretches far beyond Vivar's wooden fences. The plains of Castile do not give much, but to Rodrigo Díaz they give the beginning of a destiny. The royal court of Castile hums with a different kind of energy. Gone is the quiet struggle of Vivar. Here the air feels sharper, restless, crowded with ambition. Rodrigo arrives as a young squire in the service of Prince Sancho, and the court wastes no time testing him. It is a place where every glance is measured, every word weighed, every mistake remembered. Training begins before the sun lifts above the battlements. Rodrigo joins the other squires in the yard, breath turning white in the morning cold. The instructors are relentless. Blunted swords crash together in a rhythm that feels almost like music, harsh, metallic, unforgiving. Rodrigo learns quickly that strength alone means nothing. It is balance, timing, patience, the ability to wait for the exact moment when an opponent shifts his weight, exposes a shoulder, breathes too deeply. He studies horsemanship next. He grips the reins tightly at first, fighting the animal beneath him until an older knight hisses at him to loosen his hold. "The horse isn't your servant," the man mutters. "It's your partner. Treat it like one." Rodrigo adjusts, learning to feel the movement rather than control it. Soon he rides with ease, body low, hands steady, eyes forward. court life exposes him to a harsher education still. Sancho's brothers circle like wolves in fine clothing. Alliances form and crumble over shared wine, whispered promises, and sudden cold silences. Rodrigo watches, says little, and learns. He sees that a sword is only one kind of weapon. A man's loyalty or his betrayal cuts just as deep. His first real battle arrives without ceremony, a border skirmish, one of the countless flare-ups between Christian and Muslim lords who trade blows as often as they trade goods. Rodrigo rides out with Sancho's men, heart pounding against the inside of his ribs. The battlefield smells of trampled grass, sweat, and fear. Shouts rise, steel flashes, and in the chaos, Rodrigo does not freeze. He moves exactly as he practiced, feet planted, shield tight, strikes deliberate. It is not glory he finds out here, but survival. When he returns to camp, he sits alone, staring at his hands. They tremble, not with fear that has already passed, but with the shock of what it means to take a life. He feels older that night, not wiser, not yet, but changed. Word of his composure spreads quietly. Knights who once ignored him now nod in passing. Sancho himself watches Rodrigo with interest, seeing in him a young man who fights with discipline rather than rage. The prince values that. He surrounds himself with men who can be trusted, and Rodrigo begins to earn his place among them. But shadows hang over the court. The tension between Sancho and his brothers grows, their rivalry stretching across the kingdom like a tightening rope. Rodrigo feels it in every meeting hall, every strategy discussion, every ride along the frontier. Something is coming, something that will pull the brothers apart and drag everyone around them into the storm. For now, Rodrigo trains, learns, and listens. Every day sharpens him. Every lesson hardens him. The boy who once swung a wooden sword in a dusty village now stands on the edge of a warrior's life, aware that one wrong move in the court of Castile can be as deadly as any enemy blade. And though he doesn't know it yet, the choices made in this palace, the alliances, the loyalties, the silent vows, will soon cast him out into the world alone, forcing him to become more than just a knight, forcing him to become el-Cid. The court of Castile feels colder after the death of King Sancho. The corridors that once rang with political feuds now echo with suspicion. Rodrigo stands in the great hall as Alfonso VI takes the throne. The brother Sancho distrusted most. The brother Rodrigo fought against in battle. Loyalty leaves marks, and Rodrigo knows Alfonso has not forgotten where he once stood. Alfonso's gaze lingers on him too long. The courtiers whisper. Old wounds open again in quiet corners of the palace, and although no accusation is spoken aloud, the air is heavy with blame. Rodrigo served Sancho with unwavering loyalty. To Alfonso, that alone is enough to make him dangerous. The summons comes quickly, a royal command cloaked in courtesy. Rodrigo enters the chamber, bows and waits. Alfonso's words are measured, formal, and as cold as a drawn blade. He speaks of discipline, of disobedience, of a warrior who acts without royal approval. There is no trial, no debate, only the sentence, exile. Rodrigo leaves the court with nothing but his horse, his sword, and the weight of betrayal pressing against his ribs. His wife, Jimena, watches him with tearful resolve, knowing he must go, knowing staying would destroy him. Castile's roads stretch out before him, dusty and empty, leading into uncertainty. Exile is not freedom. It is hunger. It is vulnerability. It is waking each morning unsure if you will eat or fight or flee. But it is also clarity. Rodrigo sees the world without the mist of court intrigue. Towns shift from Christian to Muslim as easily as stepping across a river. Merchants gossip in both languages. Borders blur. And Rodrigo, who once served only one king, now steps into a wider, stranger landscape. Other exiles join him. Men who have nothing left to lose. They choose him not for his title, but for the steadiness in his voice and the calm with which he grips his sword. They call him EI-Cid, my lord, lifted from the Arabic al-Sayyid. It is a name born on dusty roads, not in palaces. Rodrigo becomes a sword for hire, but never a mindless one. He studies every valley, every fortress, every warlord's ambition. He fights for Muslim rulers who treat him with respect. He fights for Christian lords who value his precision. He crosses lines others fear to cross, forging a reputation that spreads faster than his own footsteps. Stories grow of his discipline, his mercy, his ruthlessness when necessary, of the man who refuses to break beneath exile's weight. Battles sharpen him further, small skirmishes on narrow mountain paths, sieges where smoke stings the eyes and boiling tar rains from the walls. Rodrigo rides at the front, not for show, but because he trusts no one more than himself to break the enemy line. His companions follow him with a kind of fierce loyalty. They believe he sees patterns on the battlefield that others miss, the way a commander hesitates, the gap between shield and spear, the rhythm of hooves before a charge. Yet with every victory, Rodrigo feels the pull of home. Castile still beats inside him, no matter how far he rides. The songs of his childhood echo faintly at night. The dust of Vivar never quite leaves his boots. Exile was meant to weaken him. Instead, it removes the last of his illusions. He understands now that kings rise, fall, and betray. Honour does not belong to crowns, it belongs to choices. And every choice he makes out here chisels the shape of his legend a little deeper. By the time word reaches the courts of Iberia, Rodrigo is no longer just a knight without a master. He is a force moving across the frontier, impossible to ignore, impossible to fully control. A man whose name is spoken with respect in Christian castles and Muslim palaces alike. He left Castile as Rodrigo Díaz. He wanders the frontier as el-Sayyid. The city of Valencia rises from the plain like a mirage. Pale stone walls glowing under the relentless sun, towers catching the sea breeze, palm trees swaying gently along its outskirts. To most men, Valencia is a dream. To Rodrigo, now known everywhere as el-Sayyid, it is a challenge that sets his blood humming. He arrives not as a wandering exile anymore, but as a commander with purpose. His forces are hardened, loyal, and seasoned by years of frontier battles. They gather on the hills above the city, looking down at the sprawling markets, the mosaic of rooftops, the glittering thread of the Turia River. This is no simple fortress to storm. It is a jewel, wealthy, coveted, fiercely defended. The siege begins slowly, methodically. Rodrigo does not rush. He studies the city's weak points, watches the patterns of patrols, listens to merchants and deserting soldiers who whisper secrets for coin or mercy. Food lines tighten within the walls, tempers flare, alliances crumble. Rodrigo waits, patient as stone. When the breakthrough finally comes, it is not through brute force, but through precision. A night assault on an overlooked gate, a feint at the western tower, a sudden push where defenders least expect it. The city trembles under the pressure, and then it breaks. Valencia falls. But Rodrigo does not take it by fire and destruction. He enters with control, with discipline, with the calm authority that has defined him since exile. Families peer from shuttered windows as his banners rise. Muslim and Christian citizens alike brace for brutality, for the chaos that usually follows conquest. It does not come. Rodrigo walks through the marketplace, listening to the hum of different languages, smelling spices and roasted meat mingled with the salty air drifting from the Mediterranean. He studies the faces around him, fearful, uncertain, expectant. He knows ruling a city is a different kind of battle, so he governs with a steady hand. He allows Muslim judges to continue their roles. He keeps trade flowing. He protects merchants who pledge loyalty. He treats the city not as plunder, but as a living thing that needs stability to survive. Word spreads quickly. This conqueror is not like the others. Life in Valencia changes. Fishermen bring in silver-scaled catch before dawn. Markets spill over with silk, figs, almonds and pottery painted in brilliant blues. Soldiers patrol the streets with order rather than aggression. Rodrigo holds court in a palace overlooking the sea, its walls breathing with warm light in the evenings. Even his enemies admit he rules with an intelligence that edges close to fairness. For the first time he tastes what it means to hold real power, not borrowed from a king, not dependent on noble favour, power that grows from the loyalty of people who trust his judgment. Soldiers, merchants, farmers, families who see stability under his leadership. Yet the city also brings new threats. Envious rulers watch Valencia with hungry eyes. Alfonso in Castile hears the reports with mixed emotion. To some Christian kings, Rodrigo looks less like a loyal knight and more like a rival carving out a kingdom of his own. Rodrigo feels the tension tightening around Valencia like a drawn bowstring. He spends evenings on the battlements, looking out over the sea, knowing the peace he has built can shatter with a single ambitious enemy. But for now, the city thrives under him. His companions are well-fed, well-paid, fiercely loyal. Jimena joins him in Valencia, and for a brief moment, he allows himself to imagine a life not defined by war, a life rooted in this sunlit, sea-swept place. Still, destiny circles him. A man like el-Cid cannot escape the weight of his name. And somewhere beyond the horizon, forces gather, ready to test everything he has built. The sun hangs low over Valencia, heavy and red, sinking toward the sea, as if reluctant to leave the city Rodrigo has fought so hard to hold. From the highest tower, he watches the horizon darken. Dust clouds rise in the distance, the unmistakable sign of an army on the move. Word has spread for weeks. A vast Almoravid force is marching north, determined to reclaim the city and crush the legend of el-Cid once and for all. Inside the walls, tension coils through every street. Merchants shutter their stalls. Families carry water, patch rooftops, prepare for the coming storm. Soldiers tighten their belts, check the edges of their blades, grip their shields a little harder. Valencia has known peace under Rodrigo, but peace rarely lasts in a land torn by rival kingdoms and burning ambition. Rodrigo feels the weight of it all, the city he ruled with care, the people who looked to him with trust, the men who would follow him into any battle. He stands strong, but his body betrays him. A fever gnaws at his bones. His strength fades, not from fear, but from illness, a quiet enemy that slips past armour and courage alike. He hides it from his troops, from Jimena, from everyone but his closest companions. He forces himself to ride, to command, to plan the defence of Valencia, as if nothing presses against his lungs with every breath. The city needs a leader, not a dying man. Days pass, the fever grows, the enemy draws closer. By the time the Almoravid army encircles Valencia, Rodrigo can barely stand. His skin burns, his vision swims. Yet even as the illness drags him down, his mind burns bright. He gives orders from his bed, voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. His commanders gather, listening to him describe the positioning of archers, the timing of counterattacks, the routes for messenger riders. Every instruction is clear, precise, infused with the calm certainty that has always defined him. But the fever wins its slow war. Rodrigo dies in the night, breath leaving him as quietly as a candle flame snuffed by a distant breeze. The city mourns in stunned silence. Jimena does not weep in front of the men. She stands firm, knowing Valencia balances on a knife's edge. Without el-Cid, the defenders feel the ground slipping beneath them, until someone proposes the unthinkable. If the city sees its lord ride once more, if the enemy sees el-Cid leading the charge, perhaps the fear of his legend will break them before the battle even begins. So the tale is born, half strategy, half myth. His body is armoured. His sword is placed in his hand. He is mounted on his great horse, Babieca, rigid but commanding, just as he appeared countless times before. Dawn breaks as the gates open. Jimena rides beside him, eyes fixed on the horizon. Behind them, the men follow, the sound of hooves rolling like thunder. When the enemy sees the figure of el-Cid riding out, tall and unmoving, panic ripples through the lines. Stories of his victories spread faster than truth. Some swear his eyes gleam. Others insist the horse moves with unnatural power. Fear fractures their resolve. They break, scattering across the plain before a single sword is swung. Fact blends with legend. What is true and what is embellished becomes inseparable. But one thing is certain. Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar wins one last victory. Jimena holds Valencia for a time, but the pressure from the Almoravids grows too great. Eventually, she leads the people out, carrying Rodrigo's body back to Castile, back to the land that first shaped him. Songs rise around his memory, poems spread his deeds across the kingdoms, chronicles transform him from a man of grit and discipline into a national hero, a symbol of courage, of cunning, of a frontier spirit that refuses to fade. And so el-Cid endures, not just as a warrior, not just as the Lord of Valencia, but as a legend carved into the soul of Spain, riding forever at the edge of history, where truth and myth meet in the dust.